Gururaj Ananda Yogi at Glastonbury on the 20th of November 1976.
There are such lovely vibrations here and such a golden haze over everyone spread here. It's just too beautiful. Since I came here this morning, it was about 4 o'clock, I think. Since 4 o'clock, it feels as if I've come home. Such a beautiful feeling. And I was told that Glastonbury is a special place. And it is one, I assure you that. I feel it. Okay, so as I always start off a meeting saying that I have not come to lecture to you, but rather to communicate with you. And that communication will take in the form of questions and answers. So who would like to start us off today with questions?
We'll take the questions right up here. People can line up. Is it audible in back? Can you hear through the microphone from back? Can you hear?
Testing.
So maybe cut the seats where you wait afterwards. President question.
Come down to the front.
Don't be shy, please. This is the time to ask questions.
And the questions can be of any nature, not necessarily on meditation, but on any matter of philosophy or whatever you wish. So we can even talk about cooking.
May I ask a question?
Please.
Mr. Evans Swett wrote, knowing that I is the creator of the body, and medicines and serums are for him unnecessary, how is it then that the Buddha died of poisonous mushrooms, and the two greatest saints of this century, Sri Ramana Maharshi
And Ramakrishna? I can say, yes, that is very true. Now, to answer that, we must understand one thing first, that there is no difference between mind and body. The difference would be in a matter of subtlety. In other words, the body exists on a more grosser level than the mind. The mind, which is also matter, exists on a more subtle level. Now, the quotation you have given by Evans, is it? Yeah, well, naturally that would be his interpretation. Now, the mind and the body being composed of matter is necessarily governed by the three gunas. Now, by gunas, the Sanskrit words for gunas would be tamas, rajas, and sattva. Those are the three gunas, or the three elements which govern all nature and natural existence. Now, when we discuss nature, we will realize that within the realms of nature, there is birth, development, decay, and death. Good. Now, these aspects of life and death are existent within nature itself. But those realized men like Buddha, Ramakrishna, Raman Maharshi, and these people you have described, being embodied beings, are subject to the laws of nature. In other words, their minds and bodies are subjected to the various workings of nature. Now we as human beings who are embodied and that have a bit of the mind, as far as we know it, also are subjected to the same things that the enlightened ones were subjected. Now, when it comes to enlightenment, the reference is put more on the third aspect of man, which is the spiritual aspect. In other words, man has the body, he has the mind, and has the spirit. So for the enlightened being, he is residence, his entirety is mostly based on the spiritual level, whereby he would not care to any great degree about his mind or his body. He lives in a state of its own, which we could call the transcendent state. Good. Now, one thing is sure, that the transcendent state, which is the spirit, does permeate the mind and the body, but the permeation has necessarily to go through these various facets of nature and the elements that govern nature. Now, these enlightened people seem to neglect, according to our eyes, they seem to neglect the gross body because they live on a much higher plane than the person that lives in the body itself. Now, by that we mean when a person lives in the body only, he lives in the sensual body. The sensual body is the body which is expressed by the five senses we have: seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, etc. Good. But now these enlightened beings, they do not care for the essential self. The essential selves of their beings are of no importance to them, or assume no importance whatsoever. Now that is the difference between the ordinary average man and the enlightened man. The ordinary average man lives within his senses only and mostly, whether it be on a finer level of the mind or on the physical level, and the enlightened being is one who has gone beyond the requirements of the senses and also the workings of the senses. So his existence, the existence of the enlightened being, is beyond mind and body. Now, to the enlightened person, he finds that the workings of nature are transient, they are temporary, while the life he lives in the transcendent, in the spirit, is permanent. Good. He has found within himself the calmness of the ocean that is beneath the ocean, deep down in the ocean, while the workings of nature is nothing but the turbulence that which form the waves on the ocean. So he too has gone through the waves that are on the surface and has gone deeper down into the realm or the depths where the workings of the gunas, tamas, rajas and sattva are not important. For us, they are important because tamas, rajas and sattva, the three elements which compose nature, has to be there for us and to aid us in our evolution. Now, what happens in the process of evolution is that we are not annihilating or destroying tamas, which in other words could be called inertia. We are not destroying rajas, which is the activating factor, and we are not destroying sattva either. What we are doing is to try the finer element of nature, which is sattva, in other words, light. We are trying to allow light to dominate our lives. So, by light dominating the lives, the inertia or darkness, in other words, tamas, is not destroyed but subdued. Good. Now, that is the average man on his path to progression, on his path to reach his maker. Now, this is the path that the average man has to travel until he has reached the finest sattvic value, the finest light value, the finest relative value of his life, and then he goes beyond that finest relative to become one with the Absolute, which is his spirit. Now, the enlightened man normally lives in that plane which is beyond tamas, rajas and sattva, or rather beyond the workings of the laws of nature. He is beyond all nature. So sometimes we call enlightened beings a law unto themselves. Good. Now, when a person becomes a law unto himself, or beyond all laws that govern the physical or the material universe, then he ceases to care. He ceases to care for his body. Now, to us, Ramakrishna or Raman Maharshi, to us he might seem to be in great pain. He might seem, from our eyes that is, from our eyes he might seem to be in great pain, but in reality he might be experiencing the finest ecstasy, or the deepest ecstasy, which we call bliss. So, from our point of view, he is suffering, but from his point of view, the suffering is just a play, the surface waves upon the ocean, which he really is, because he has now transcended the surface waves and become one with the depth of the ocean, which is the core and true nature of every human being. I have always said that the nature of man is divine. So those enlightened beings, they are called enlightened beings because they have reached divinity and they live in divinity. So when you have tasted of supreme bliss, when you have tasted nectar, in Sanskrit is amrit, when you have tasted yes. So when you have tasted amrit or nectar, right, and then these little teaspoonfuls of sugar does not matter. Good. These little teaspoonfuls of sugar does not matter because the teaspoonfuls of sugar also contain another element. How to recognize the sweetness of sugar is to know something which is bitter. Is to know something which is bitter. So this necessarily presupposes the law of opposites. So in order to know pleasure, one knows pain. In order to know sunshine, one has to know rain. Good. So in that way, in order to know what is white, one has to know what is black. So all these things are still within the realms of nature. And all these laws of opposites compose what we know as nature. Good, fine. So these enlightened beings are beyond the law of opposites and they dwell in the plane of bliss, which is absolute. So for them, having gone beyond the law of opposites, the very law of opposites, the very law of pleasure and pain, to them become non-existent. Now, the human body is composed of various chemical substances and is composed of billions and billions of cells which obey these various laws. So the one that is beyond the law of opposites and experiences bliss, why should he be concerned with the law of opposites? So whatever happens to the body is not important to him, or assumes no importance whatsoever to him, because he does not feel the heat and he does not feel the cold. He does not feel the pain and he does not feel the pleasure, because he is now in that state which is bliss, the indescribable state of bliss. So we do find that these enlightened men, having gone beyond the law of opposites, do not care whatsoever for their bodies. For example, you put on a suit and the suit might find a tear on the coat or the pants or whatever, and you're not going to be disturbed by it so greatly, are you? So you say it's torn, and you put on another suit. So to them, this body and this mind, which is part of the material existence, assumes no importance whatsoever, and they know that its value, the value of mind and body, is very, very transitory. And once when a person dwells within the eternal and becomes eternity itself, then what is the value of the transitory, the secular, the impermanent? Yes. Once you have £1 million in the bank, you are not going to stand in the street begging for pennies. Good. So to the enlightened, so to the enlightened man, the mind and body does not matter. To the mind, the body does not matter, and to the body, the mind is of no consequence whatsoever. So that is why we find that people in the enlightened state do not suffer at all, and they throw the body to the winds. In other words, by throwing the body to the winds, they maintain that which is composed of natural elements, they are subjected. They know that the body, the material field of existence, is subjected to life, to birth, decay, and death. And being beyond that, it is of no concern whatsoever. Okay. Thank you. Lovely. Good. Who shall be next? Oh, this is nice.
Does the universe ever end? Does the universe ever end?
He wants to know whether the universe will ever end. Does the universe ever end?
Ah, what a beautiful question. Here we have a philosopher. Lovely, lovely, lovely. You've put me in a muddle. Yes, what a beautiful question. The universe, now, a child does homework, and then the teacher marked the homework. Fine. And so after the teacher marked the homework, sends a message that please tell Daddy this question was not properly answered. So nevertheless, what I'm going to try and do now is to try and answer the question of the ending of the universe for the child and for the father. Shall we try that? Good. And that would be difficult, really. The universe does not end. The universe does not end. It does not end because the composition of the universe is love. Right. And love is something which mummies and daddies have for their children. Good. And the real love of mummies and daddies for the children should always remain and always are unending. So the little universe which you are, that experience this beautiful love from your mother and father, would be unending. It will be there forever and ever for you. And of course, your little universe and their big universe come together in that beautiful love which makes your universe and their universe unending too. Good. Right. And as you grow up, you'd find this more and more when you meet your little girlfriend. Have one? Yes. So there too, your girlfriend herself, when you meet her, blonde one, okay? Yes, she's also a little universe. She's also a little universe because in her is also that love. So then, first you start sharing your little universe with the universe of mommy and daddy. in love, and then you meet your girlfriend, and then there's another sharing that takes place between your girlfriend's universe and your universe. So here we have your universe, mommy's universe, daddy's universe, girlfriend's universe. How many are that? 1, 2, 3, 4? Fine, good. And then when you grow up and you have children, then there are more universes. Okay, so there are so many universes. Good. Now, sometimes when we use the word universe, we maintain that to be the sum totality of all creation. Now, if creation is endless and beginless, then there would be no end to creation, because creation has had no beginning. But one thing that happens is this, that there are universes within universes in the whole scheme of things, which is infinite. Good. Now, if divinity is infinite, without beginning or end, then his creation too has to be without beginning and end. Because if he is beginless, then he has been creating from time beginless. Therefore, the universes that we talk of, or the totality of all universes, is beginless and endless. But within this whole scheme of things, within the scheme of beginlessness and endlessness, there are other universes which begin and which end. Now, if we study our human bodies, we would find that there are billions of cells forever creating themselves and destroying themselves, dissolving rather, and within a few years, the entire system of the body is recreated. The old cells are dissolved or destroyed, and new cells take birth. So in like manner, the universe, or the composition of the human body, or the composition of an atom, is exactly the same as the entirety of existence. And existence is the universe. And existence is an attribute of being, which we call infinity. The personalized attributes of being would be existence, it would be knowledge, it would be bliss. But in that instance, when we describe existence in that manner, we call it absolute existence. We call it absolute knowledge. We call it absolute bliss. Now, these are very relative terms to describe something which is indescribable by words. It is verbally indescribable. Now, to get back to our first point, the entirety is beginless and it is endless. But because here nature, the laws of nature come in again, where there are universes within universes, and those smaller creations, those little pieces in the entire jigsaw is subject to change. So therefore we would find whole universes exploding in the scheme of things. We hear of whole solar systems being exploded or dissolved into finer and finer elements, which in turn congeal to create greater and greater universes. The analogy, we can go back to the sea, where we have a great wave coming up, and that same great wave subsides again. So in that too, the wave is not destroyed, but it has subsided, but to rise again. So these are the changes that are forever taking place within the higher or greater scheme of things which is beginless and which is endless. This we will find in our human bodies. We will find this in the minutest atom, and this we will find in its entirety of that which we know so little. Now our human minds can reach the entirety of all existence, can reach the entirety of all existence, and we can do that through our meditational practices, that by diving deeper and deeper within the levels and within the deeper and deeper recesses of the mind, we can traverse the entire existence. In other words, there too the mind can be taken to a point where it can cognize, not on the intellectual level, but the mind combined with the heart, with the expansion of the heart, it can cognize experientially that which is never born and that which will never die. So this is the composition of the entirety. I think that was for the daddy, huh? Okay. Yes.
The part about rest, we've been taught in TM before. I had been taught.
What is TM?
TM. It's a technique I used to practice.
Whatever it is.
Anyway, it was sort of understood that the deeper the rest you had, the more integrated and purified the body becomes, and therefore the more the divinity can flow through that. And so therefore deep rest was said to be necessary.
Good. Does that end the question?
Yes, it's really part of the first.
Right. Now can I start answering it?
Yes.
Sit down, please. Lovely. Yes, well, naturally, many schools of thought, teach their own way. What we are most concerned about is our way, right? And we do recognize the necessity for that deep rest of the body, and we do recognize the deep rest of the mind. Now, for the enlightened man, there again, we touch upon the first part of your question. For the enlightened man, he could live his life in absolute turbulence, seemingly, which is turbulent to us from our level looking up. He can live in that life of turbulence, but inwardly, he is experiencing the deep calm, deep tranquility, deep rest. Yes, so your question is right and very true, that we that are in the kindergarten have to train ourselves to find that beautiful relaxation of mind and body. We know that in this 20th century, in east, west, north, south, everyone seems to be living a very, very hectic life. And we have brought this hecticness upon us. We have brought this upon us. So now we have to find a way to find the tranquility. We have to find a way whereby the body could be well rested and the mind could follow suit with equal rest as well. And when one achieves that tranquility, one can go beyond the mind and body and be in touch with that being that is within us. Now, this is one form of yoga. This forms part and parcel of Raja Yoga. What I described to you earlier was Karma Yoga, where you have full activity. And you reach a state where in that activity you are rested. You are rested automatically in all that hustle and bustle. So our teachings when it comes to meditations such as mantra meditations and certain other yogic techniques, it is the path of Raj Yoga. Good. Now in our systems of meditation, we incorporate, is that her 15 minutes duty now, to look after the children. Yeah, that is very beautifully organized, where everyone takes a bit of time to look after the children. Good. Now, in our system, we incorporate all the yogas. We incorporate the methods whereby the deep rest is attained of mind and body and where being is touched. And then in the waking state, we do say that let us do our best. I spoke about this last night, I think. We do our best in our waking state to better ourselves, to face our weaknesses and better those weaknesses. And we have the ability, once we have diagnosed our problems, then proper diagnosis, as a doctor would tell you, is half the cure. So we incorporate in our system Raja Yoga, the methods of mantra and other forms of meditation, which falls under Raja Yoga. We incorporate Karma Yoga, whereby we better ourselves by first finding our weaknesses and replacing weaknesses with strength. Fine. And then we also practice Gnana Yoga. Now Gnana Yoga is the yoga of wisdom. And that is where mental analysis comes in, which also serves a useful purpose. Now, for a person to do any practice or develop any skill in action, he must necessarily appreciate with his mind, to a certain extent, the value of the practices which he is doing, or the mode of life he is living. Now this mental analysis of the various systems is called Gnana Yoga, or the yoga of wisdom. So in our system we develop Raja Yoga, the practices, Karma Yoga, the way of living, and Gnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom. And with the combination of these three yogas, we are also in touch with the fourth yoga, which is called Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of devotion, where husband becomes devoted to the wife, wife becomes devoted to the husband, and like that devotion increases. Our aim in life is to be in touch with the abstract. Now, the abstract might seem inconceivable to the limitations of the mind. So what we do is approach the abstract through the concrete. Now, the object of our devotion could be our guru, could be our wife, could be our husband, could be any personage, past or present, with whose teachings we agree and whose teachings are beneficial to us. And by having that utter devotion to the person or personage or object, we automatically draw upon universal forces unto ourselves, and by drawing the universal forces unto ourselves, we benefit with greater expansion of mind. There we are aiding the yoga of wisdom by greater awareness. We are aiding our practical living life, which is Karma Yoga. Fine. And we are also at the same time becoming deeper and deeper and going deeper into our practices. Fine. So here, Bhakti, Karma, Gnana and Raja Yoga, all these yogas merge in our teachings. They all become part and parcel of each other. And that leads to the totality of life that we should really be living. Now, if we have a motor car and the motor car has 6 pistons, I don't think we should be satisfied if the car runs on 4 pistons only. We know that the car has 6 pistons, and to get the maximum value of that car running smoothly, we must get all 6 pistons working beautifully. What happens to us because of our limited and conditioned minds? The carburetor sometimes becomes dirty. Now divinity is within us. We know that. We have to accept that. It is there to be experienced. But that petrol cannot flow through and give the car a smooth run if the carburetor is dirty. So what we do, we clean the carburetor. We clean out the jets and all the dirt that is in the carburetor so that the petrol can run through and our car can run smoothly ahead. That's all. Now, how do we clean this carburetor? Is by our meditational practices for the start. Fine. That would lead us to live a better integrated life in the waking state. That will give us some understanding, Gnana Yoga. That will give us devotion. So our yoga is the yoga which could be an integrated way where all these teachings are combined, and that could lead us to quicker progress. Now, we all know that we have come from divinity, and to divinity we reach. We know that. But without doing anything, we will take 2 million years perhaps. But we don't want to wait so long. We want to reach there faster. So therefore we have these practices that combines all these forms which I have very briefly described to you, and you will find as we become more and more established in these various modes of living and in the understanding we gain, in the devotion we develop, and doing our practices regularly, we find that life becomes more and more joyous because we are using all the pistons of the car. And not just running on 1 or 2 or 3 pistons. And that is how joy increases, love increases, and then there's such a beautiful flow where all hearts can merge as one heart, where all hearts can beat, in the one impulse, the one impulse which is creation itself. Which is creation itself. People say there are so many hearts. I would say there's only one heart, the one universal heart, and there's only one heartbeat. And when we recognize this factor, then will we know the unity instead of diversity that exists. Then we can say, I and my Father are one. Then we can really practice love thy neighbor as thyself, because that is all one, and within the circumference of that oneness, which in other ways we know as love or love divine. Okay, good, thank you.
Can I ask the age-old question, why did God give us a soul? Why is it necessary for the soul to leave the Absolute and go on its journey over many lifetimes to rejoin the Absolute? What happens to it? They're all part of the question. What happens to it when we die, when the soul leaves our gross body? Does it go to an astral plane? Why have we no memory of this?
Mm-hmm. Good. Now. No. What I need is pen and paper, because I'm going to start writing a whole volume on that. Yes, because that is a very, very profound question. Now, this question has been asked, and the various aspects of this question has been asked by philosophers through the ages. That why should man become individualized? Number one. What are the mechanics of individualization? Number two. And if individualization occurs, why should it exist as a separate entity? Number three, if it exists as a separate entity, what is the relationship between the great entity and the small entity? Number four, or was it 5? Nevertheless, so this question could go on for a long time. Can we start the second session with this? Because it would take a long time to answer all those aspects. Gita has just reminded me that we have to break for supper. Is that what it is? Oh, are we having supper here? Bravo! Lovely. So I'm at your disposal. We can go into this, but I'm thinking of your convenience because the next session starts in In 2 hours. And I've got how many people to see in between? About 9 people to see in the 2 hours individually. Is that what it is? Good. Shall we leave that for later? Good. As I said this afternoon, and which I normally say at every meeting, that I've not come to lecture to you, but rather to communicate with you. And that, of course, would mean the flow between mind and heart and heart. And this could be successfully be achieved by questions and answers. So who would like to start off with the first question?
Gururaj, is there always a lesson to be learned from suffering? And do we experience illness because of some karmic debt we have to pay? If so, can we interfere with the paying of that karmic debt by seeking to be healed?
Good. That's a beautiful question. Now, the question basically is that, is there any lesson to be learned by suffering? Good. And do we pay any karmic debt by any illnesses we suffer? And would it be advisable to become ill?
Do we gain from healing?
Do we gain from healing? Do we gain from healing? Is that what it is? Mm-hmm.
And we interfere with the pain that?
By healing. Healed. Good, fine. Mm-hmm. Good. Firstly, man is not born to suffer. There is an innate divinity in man which would proclaim over and over and over again that thou art divine. And by recognizing the divinity that is within us, all suffering would cease, or there would be no cognition of any form of suffering. So basically, man is not born to suffer. Good. But we find in the world and in our existences, we do find suffering. Good. Now the question would be, why should man suffer? And for that, we will have to define what the law of karma is. Now, karma, basically and literally interpreted, would be the law of action. In other words, whatever you sow, that shall you reap. Good. It is also a law of retribution, perhaps in our terms, when we talk of suffering. Now, if man is basically divine, what are the mechanics? What happens in man that causes him to suffer? And where is this suffering located? Because if the inner core of man is divine and the nature of divinity is bliss, then naturally we could assume that the suffering does not take place in the inner core, which is bliss. So we can exclude the divinity in man from all suffering. The divine in man does not suffer because its nature is bliss. Now, what part of man suffers? The part of man that suffers would be mind and body. Good. Now, doctors have discovered that most illnesses, and over 90% of the beds in hospital, are of psychosomatic illnesses. In other words, the illnesses man suffers stems from the mind or the mind processes of man. Good. Now, how can we alter those processes that goes through the mind, and how can we repattern the mind so that the body does not suffer? Those are the questions. Firstly, the mind is a conditioned mind. All our minds, as individual minds, if you wish to call them such, are necessarily conditioned by our past actions, by where we were born, in what family we were brought up, and by our environment, and supposedly by the inflictions inflicted upon us by the environment. Good. Now, if the mind is patterned to receive outside inflictions, or if the mind is conditioned to create these inflictions upon ourselves, then we could go through an immense amount of emotional turmoil. And apart from emotional turmoil, we could go through a process of mental imbalance. Those are psychological diseases. Psychosomatically speaking, those very imbalances in the mind can be interpreted through the organic self of man, which is the physical self of man. And this is the contention of most doctors, that even those diseases which we find to be organic would have a psychological origin. So, in order to find a more healthier body, we have to tackle the root source, which is the mind. Now, this is in the sphere of modern psychoanalysis, which psychologists practice, and it is also in the sphere of the psychiatrists. But psychology and psychiatry, being still in the stage of infancy, most of the treatments are done in such a manner that does not always heal. That does not always heal, and more failures are found than successes. And even in these successes, we find that these successes are temporary, because the whole mind, the conditioned mind, has to be repatterned. A conditioned mind means that the mind has been patterned not only by the happenings in this life, but it could go further back into past lives if you do believe in past lives. And if you do believe in past lives, do take it for granted that what we are today, we are the sum total of all the words, thoughts, and deeds that we have been through, that we have thought in our minds, the actions which we have performed in those lifetimes, and all those things have created sanskaras, which is a Sanskrit term, and which could be interpreted very loosely in the form of impressions. So, in the human mind contains the impressions of many, many lifetimes of living. Good. Now, the extent, as I said this afternoon, to a very similar question, that the extent of the human mind is to the extent of the universe. In other words, we that have progressed through evolutionary processes from the mineral kingdom to the plant to the animal, and now we have reached to the stage of man, and yet the mind of man has the capacity to contain all the impressions that were created, that were implanted in this memory box that we have through all those varied existences. Now, when we think of illnesses that stem mostly from the mind, there could have been certain imbalances caused by the happenings to us in those existences. Good. And therefore, man suffers. Man suffers because of the imbalances. Now, what psychologists and psychiatrists do, they probe just to the extent of the knowledge they have of man's mind. And as we know, and as they would admit, that we know only, or we are only conscious of 10% of the human mind. So the treatment given by psychologists and psychiatrists is necessarily limited to 10% of the mind, while 90% of the mind remains dormant. And therefore, the failures that we find in these treatments is because the causes might lie in the 90% mind of which we know nothing. Human knowledge of that field is very limited. So there are practices devised whereby the 10% mind does not need to rationalize, does not need to cognize the 90% which is dormant. We have, through meditational and other spiritual practices, we have the method where we traverse the 90% which is dormant. And by traversing the 90% that is dormant, we go right to the core of ourselves, which is normally termed as the spiritual self. Now, the spiritual self could be equated with that divinity we spoke of earlier, that infinite capacity that is inherent in every man. So what we do here is that to alleviate our suffering that we have brought upon ourselves because of the conditioning of our minds, what we do here is we dive deep within ourselves through meditational practices, whereby we draw from the inner core, from the reservoir, that divine energy, and bring it through to the 90% dormant mind, and then further on through the 10% mind that we know of, and then from there to the body. And we have found by spiritual practices that the body and the mind that we know of has gained very much towards its betterment. And most of the meditators will tell us that they have received the wonderful bodily relaxation which is so much needed, as Amrit has mentioned, in this modern day and age, and whereby the mind too has been relaxed. So when it comes to treatment of any ailment, our system would be to go right back to the source of divinity, and from there draw those energies so that they would permeate the entire level of our conscious and dormant minds, and through every living cell in our bodies. And by this we do benefit. Now, is suffering necessary? Was part of the question. Suffering is necessary, and this what constitutes the suffering. The suffering that we feel is just because the mind, the conditioned mind, is becoming unconditioned. Unconditioned in a sense that it assumes a more uncomplex nature. We have been instrumental in taking the uttermost simplicity, the childlikeness within us, into various forms of complexities. And it is only the various forms of complexities that seem suffering to us. What we are doing, in fact, is this, that upon the realm of divinity that is within us, we are superimposing the complexities created by ourselves in our minds and covering up the light that should really shine through. And that is the nature and basis of all imbalance in our lives. You can interpret it as illness, or you can interpret it as any form of suffering. So, if we take a piece of string and wrap it around our finger, what we have to do to loosen the string is to unwrap it. And that is the process of meditation. Now, in the process of meditation, of unconditioning the conditioned mind, it is a painless process. It becomes painless because we are drawing a sustaining energy from deep within ourselves. But if we do not meditate or perform any form of meditation, it could be any system, any valid system that could be beneficial to us. If we don't perform these systems, then what happens is this, that the conditioned mind tries to uncondition itself in various forms. One of the forms could be escaping the conditioning. Escaping the conditioning. Another form could be becoming aggressive to the conditioning. And these two factors cause more and more complications. Now, when we escape the conditionings of our mind and build a wall around us, we are not curing the disease. We are just burying the disease, like in a garden. We are not weeding the weeds, but burying them deeper. And sooner or later, in some form or the other, the weeds will emerge again. Our problem and our method is to eradicate those weeds, to pull them out, root and all. Fine. That is the one process. So, escaping from our problems or trying to escape from suffering is not the solution. Many people try to express their sufferings within themselves in a very aggressive manner. And they become not only aggressive to themselves, in other words, inflict more suffering on themselves, but in turn, they become aggressive to the environment and thereby try and inflict sufferings on others. Now, as we are, so are others. And the inflictions we impart upon others can be felt by those others because they too might just be as weak as we are. So, through meditational processes, what we are doing is alleviating the root causes of the suffering that we have to suffer, the root causes of suffering. We are eradicating it through a painless process, and the painless process is to draw from within, from the divine reservoir, to draw that energy so that it could flood our lives and wash away the dirt. And once the dirt and disease is washed away, our life becomes less in suffering. And as it becomes less in suffering, more joy increases. Because the human mind can never remain a vacuum. It has to be filled with positivity or negativity. Suffering is negativity. Joy is positivity. So the less negativity there is, the more positivity would emerge. And the more positivity there is, the less negativity would there be, and vice versa, the other way around. So, by gaining an understanding of meditational processes, not only gaining the understanding of it, but also by practicing it, we do gain these benefits of these energies which are inherently ours. Good. Now, as far as its karmic value is concerned, do we have to really go through suffering to get rid of our karma? So that is a question. $64,000. Good. Yes, we have to work off our karma. We have to work off our karma, and I quoted the other day that if you have killed 10 people, then it is not beautiful. Lovely, lovely. Now that is my karma. Beautiful, so lovely. Ah, so lovely, so lovely.
You could have some too if you like.
Yes, I will. Good. Right. Now, in karma, if we have, say, killed 10 people, good. Now, now if we have killed 10 people, it is not necessary to be killed 10 times. That is not how karma works. Now, if we have killed 10 people, using this as an analogy, if we have killed 10 people, what we do to get rid of the karma of killing 10 people is to save the lives of 11 people. And then one cancels out the other. Now, say during the day, for 10 seconds you have negative thoughts. Okay? The next 11 seconds you have positive thoughts, so there is 1 to your credit. Good. For the next 10 seconds there might be negative thoughts, and for the next 11 seconds positive thoughts, another 1 to your credit. So now you have 2. Credit balance. Good. Right. Now if we total up the whole day's activity throughout the day, right, and if we find ourselves in the credit balance and not in the red, if we find ourselves in the credit balance, then do know that that day has been well lived. So there are forces which cancel each other out. So we teach a message of hope, that if a person who thinks that he is a sinner, he does not need to feel that there's no hope for him. For self-realization is the birthright of each and every one of us. We are inherently divine, as I said over and over again, and it is our birthright to know the divine nature that is within us. But because of the veils that has covered the mind, that is the cause, and that is the suffering that we know as suffering. So that is the process. And if we are ill, do we require healing? We do require healing if we are ill. We must not think that rather remain ill and that will help us to rub away our karmic debts. No. Become well, be healed, and perform good deeds that will rub out the bad deeds. And that is how karma will forever and forever balance. And then one day when we pass away or discard this little flesh and blood, and at that moment if we could really and honestly say to ourselves that there is a good credit balance, then we could say, well lived life, well lived. Huh? Okay. Good. Thank you. Fine. Who asked the next question?
Well, the question actually was very closely linked with the first one, and some of the answers have already been given.
I normally do that.
But if I could just
Yeah.
clarify.
Please.
In your role as a powerhouse for others, and therefore giving them extra, if they had not met you, how does this, if at all, affect their karma or lessons that they have learnt? In other words, you're helping them, so in effect, you are, if you like, overriding part of their karma, perhaps?
Very good question. Yes, yes. Okay, fine. I am not the powerhouse or storehouse of divine energies. I am just a channel. I am just a channel that has, through my own karma, developed the ability to draw upon universal forces and pass them on to the person who learns to meditate on our techniques. It's just as simple as that. I am nothing special, nothing at all. I am as ordinary as you are, absolutely ordinary, and even more humble than what you are, because that is what I have been striving for, utter humility. And this is something one does gain by becoming one within oneself, by finding that integration, that you become so humble that you could identify yourself with the meanest little creature that crawls on the ground, or the highest evolved man. And that is one of the signs of self-integration, is that it brings within us that humility. So I am nothing but a hollow reed that could be made into a flute. And there is that divine source that blows through it, those eternal melodies that will pierce your ears and your minds and your hearts. It is not me. It is not me. Knowing me is beneficial only to the extent that I does not mean this, right? That we have developed the ability or acquired the ability to be able to become a doctor, physical doctor, mental doctor, spiritual doctor. Right, fine. So by being attuned, by having developed that insight or the humility to be able to identify myself with the meanest crawling creature or the highest developed man, it means an identification. So, in meditation, when I go into meditation, I can attune myself with your evolutionary status. Fine. And in attunement with that evolutionary status, I could assess the imbalance within man. Now, we must not be discouraged about that, because 99.99999, I can go on and on, percentage of people are not balanced people, because if there was that balance between mind, body, and soul, then there would be no suffering. Good. So it is only the self-integrated man, the self-realized man, that has no suffering. So here the doctor of the spirit, what he does, he analyzes, assesses. He can hear his instrument, his stethoscope, is being able to hear the vibration. As the physical doctor hears the heartbeats with his stethoscope, the guru with his stethoscope of the mind beyond this mind. From that level, he can analyze, assess, and evaluate the spiritual status of a person. And by evaluating and assessing the spiritual status of the person, he can prescribe a technique whereby his progress towards the realization of the divinity within him would be a straight road, would be a direct road. Now, if we want to reach Name some city. London. If we want to reach London from here, there might be so many roads leading to London, right? One road might have a lot of traffic lights and a lot of motor cars, and that would make your journey through trial and error and all the stumbling blocks more arduous, more lengthy perhaps, and it might take more time. But then you might have a motorway, M6, M4. Good. Then you might have this motorway that could take you directly to London very smoothly without any hitches, and you would reach there quicker. Now do remember, the distance to travel is the same. Say London is 100 miles from here, so from our present evolutionary status to our destination, finding divinity within us, the distance is the same. But there could be a direct path that could lead us there quicker. And that is what happens when a person's evolutionary status is evaluated and prescribed for specifically by specific practices. So I am nothing but just a spiritual doctor, that's all. Nothing more, nothing less. And that is how our system works. That is how our system works. Okay. Have I left out anything from your question? So it is not necessary. It is not necessary. A man can be directly in contact with that divinity. He does not need a guru. But I think we discussed it last night or during one of these talks, that when a person is in kindergarten, he might need a teacher to teach him the ABCs. And once he has learned that, then the child will start reading on its own. So the purpose of the external guru is to awaken in man the internal guru that is forever there. So when the internal guru is awakened within man, then the external guru can be discarded. He has served his purpose. Good. And that is the process. So there is no contention at all that I am the storehouse of the spiritual energies, and only through me can man benefit. There is no such contention, because to say that would be very contentious. It is wrong. Okay. Fine. Good. Next.
More questions people would like to ask?
Except the long one here. The long one.
Yes.
I've answered quite a part of it in that first one there. Good. Anyone else? Yes, there's a lady over there.
I have two questions, Gururaj. The first, I'd like to hear something about your tradition and the tradition of your master. And the second, you may have dealt with before, I don't know. That's you talk about the mind, the body, and the soul. I'd like to hear something about the soul.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, yes. Do you want to know about my soul or your soul? Or the universal soul? Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Are you comfortable, love? Just sit back, relax. Okay, fine. When a person talks of tradition, then traditions could become dogmatic. There the argument always rises, there conflicts rise, that one would say, I am from the Christian tradition, and I am from the Muslim tradition, and I am from the Buddhist tradition, and I am from the Hindu tradition. When man goes beyond traditional values, does man really know the true essence of tradition, the universal tradition? All conflicts in the world, and we have known when we study history that in the name of religion and tradition, so much dogmatism has taken place that it has closed up people's minds. So many wars have been fought in the name of traditions, where rivers of blood flowed because of tradition, that my tradition is right and your tradition is wrong. Always a conflict, always a conflict. And really speaking, underlying all these traditions is the true tradition, meaning the essence of all religions. So if you would look at our symbol, and most of our meditators here know our symbol, where all the religions are portrayed on the symbol, and behind it are 5 lines which are used in musical notation, which means, which could be interpreted as harmony. Let there be harmony amongst all religions, because basically, essentially, the truths of all religions is the same. It's like rivers coming from different directions and ultimately becoming one in the same ocean. So I speak from a position of all traditions put together in one harmony. At one moment I will quote the Vedas to you. At one moment I will quote the Bible to you. At another moment I will quote to you some of the truths that are in the Quran. So what we do is try and find the basic truths, or the basic truth, the ultimate truth that is contained within all religions and all traditions. I have spent 25 years in a Western country, right, to learn about Western traditions. I've spent the balance of my lifetime, and in the 25 years I do go back and forth to India and visit my gurus and what have you all the time, to learn and learn and learn and learn. To learn the various ways of life, which form a universal tradition. Now there's a lovely little story. Now these conflicts arise. There were 4 blind men going through a forest. And here in this forest they came upon an elephant. So the one caught hold of the tail, the one caught hold of the leg, the one the ear, and one the, what do you call that? Trunk, yes, trunk. Fine, good. So the one that got hold of the tail said that, I found God, he's like a rope. Yeah. The one that got caught hold of the leg says, I found God, he's like a tree stump. And like that, these 4 blind men started arguing and fighting. Really speaking, each and every one of them had found an aspect of truth. And that was the aspect of the particular truth they found formed the basis of their tradition. What we are trying to do is to go beyond or transcend all tradition. Right. And when one transcends the boundaries of tradition, one speaks from direct cognition. Direct cognition is that which supersedes all traditions. Fine. If someone asks me, are you a Christian? I say yes. If someone asks me, are you a Hindu? I say yes. If someone asks me, are you a Muslim? I say yes. Someone asks me, are you a Buddhist? I say yes. Yes, I'm all those. Why not? Because there are so many beautiful things in all those traditions, and yet we can go beyond all those traditions which direct perception of truth can give you. So my authority is based on my personal direct experience and communication with that which is within me. I'm a yogi. He told you about it earlier. You see, so that is the authority that I speak from. Everything I tell you, dear lady, is not from what I've read in books. Everything I tell you comes from my heart and soul, from my innermost being, things which I've experienced. What am I doing here 6,000 miles away from my home and living in on a suitcase or from a suitcase? Although the English people have been so kind to make me feel so comfortable, they've really gone out of their way in sharing this beautiful love. I have come here to share that love and bliss which I have experienced and to share it with one and all. And that is my dharma, and that dharma was conditioned by my karma. Okay. Good, fine. Good, fine. Now you wanted to know the nature of the soul. The nature of the soul. The nature of the soul, and you asked for the universal soul. The nature of the universal soul is inexplicable, it is indefinable, but experienceable. When we say soul, we mean divinity. The universal soul is none different than God.